charge, right? Like you would listen to that word and it would be like, okay, fine. And over the past several years, specifically 2020, 2021, it was used. It was like a real buzzword at the start of our quarantine. We're resilient. We're going to get through this. And it has been misused. And this is because of corporations and large companies said, you can work more. You're working from home now. Take on an extra project. You're resilient. It doesn't matter that you're doing childcare and working. You're resilient. And so you hear these toxic messages all of the time. Resilience went from being something that's true, which is honoring your boundaries, making space and time for rest and to recharge, focusing on a sense of self-compassion, and understanding that you are a human being with limitations. That is true resilience. Toxic resilience is productivity at all costs, a mind over matter mindset, and what many of us think of as true resilience is in fact toxic resilience. We are taught from a very young age that dealing with discomfort and being okay with discomfort is what resilience is all about. And I am here to debunk that because absolutely not. Resilience is our innate biological ability, but it also needs rest and recovery. It is not meant to be toxic.
But being resilient, is that a good thing in your view? Being a resilient person?
Being
Not in the
a
biological context. I mean, being psychologically resilient.
Being resilient is an excellent thing to be. It is something that we can learn how to be better at. And yes, true resilience is wonderful. The challenge right now is that many of us hear the word resilience and we bristle at it. I do. When I hear, the messaging of toxic resilience, no one calls it toxic resilience when they're giving you that messaging. They just say, hey, it's the resilience. It's cringeworthy, right? Like you hear it like, oh, be more resilient. And so, yes, true resilience is a gift. It is our innate biological ability. We all have the power and the aptitude for true resilience. But toxic resilience is what we often see and what is often promoted. And that is something that needs to stop.
Do you think people are getting more or less resilient with the nature of the way that the world is? I often have the conversation about whether, the boomer generation are more or less resilient than the Gen Z or whatever's coming next. What's next? Is it like Alpha? I think it's Generation Alpha. These new generations. And the stereotypical argument is that because the boomer generation were working in factories and mines and they were doing harder labor and they had less comparison because they didn't have social media and they didn't see, their mate down the road having a chock-a-frock latte yata during their lunch break and doing yoga sessions, whatever, then they are more resilient. And the Gen Zs, they got it easy. They're all doing breath work and yoga for 6 hours a day. Is that true?
I would say no, because we know that with Gen Z and other younger populations, we're seeing a rise in mental health, burnout, stress like we've never seen before. And I don't think it's because they're quote unquote less resilient. They are managing lots and lots of onslaughts. They've lived through something really awful. They've had a sense of collective trauma. Their minds are still young. They haven't had that lived experience of, decades of going through stuff. So no, I don't think so. And of course, the older generation is going to say that. I remember when I was in my medical training, people would say, 80 hours, it's all you're working? Because we worked 120 hours because there was some reform in terms of like how many hours we could work as medical residents. And 80 hours felt awful to me. And so I think it's important to validate and normalize people's difficult experience. And it's not about what happened to you, so in this example about prior generations, it's about helping people feel a sense of validation, because if you need to name it to tame it. And so, for example, when you are going through a difficult experience, like a young person, there's such a rise of anxiety, depression, stress-related conditions, sleep disorders, mental health challenges, physical health challenges in the younger population. It's not because they're not resilient. It's because they're living in a hyper-connected world, and that is causing all sorts of issues down the road for them, both mental health and physical health. So I reject this idea that the older generation was more resilient. They had less stimulation, and they had, different challenges. But I think it's important to normalize and validate the difficult experience that people are having.
I want to go through your book now, which is called The 5 Resets, which is released January 2024. Very exciting. Which really aims to take on how we deal with stress, how we manage stress. There's sort of shades of neuroplasticity and how we can change our responses to stress. But I guess this first question about the canary in the coal mine, why did you write about that? What's that got to do with stress?
It has everything to do with stress because stress is something that is so individualized. And that's something that we were talking about earlier, right? Like some people who feel a sense of stress have physical manifestations. Like I had palpitations, you had palpitations, someone else might have headaches, neck pain, shoulder pain, back pain, GI upset, gastrointestinal issues, dizziness, fatigue, sleep problems, irritability, anger. The list goes on and on. It's like never-ending list. And the canary in the coal mine is my way of, personally, it's my way of really explaining this idea of the physical manifestations of stress. So my canary in the coal mine was palpitations.
What is that phrase? I've never heard the phrase, the canary in the coal mine. Well, I've heard the phrase before, but I've just kind of been one of those people that pretends they know what it means.
The canary in the coal mine is a historical reference. Back when there were coal miners, they would bring a canary, a bird, down into the mines with them. The bird would sing its canary song. When the air got bad, the workers were just working, right? Like 12-hour days and continued to work. When the air got bad, the canary would stop singing. They were in their mode. They didn't understand, they weren't paying attention. And when the canary stopped singing, that was the first tell that the air is bad, before any physical or mental health ramifications for the workers. And so the coal miners, when they stopped hearing the canary song, they would leave the mine with the canary, and it was the first tell of something going awry. And so everyone has a canary within them that tells them a signal, a song that is telling them that there is something happening with their stress. I didn't pay attention to it. It took the palpitations to occur every single night for 2 weeks before I sat up and took notice. All of the physical manifestations of stress that I've mentioned, of course, you need to see a doctor, like you and I did, got the full workup and been told stress is often what we call a diagnosis of exclusion, meaning you rule out any organic problems and then you say, okay, this is because of stress. So seeing your doctor and getting that full workup is important. I have to say that as a medical professional because I believe in the medical system and I'm part of the medical system. And so the canary in the coal mine is this idea that we all have a song, a stress song, and our body is trying to tell us something. And understanding that canary symptom for you, it takes a little time to dig through, but once you kind of figure it out, then you can use that. We all have our Achilles heel of something that is the tell. So if you have a medical condition like, say, peptic ulcer disease, that's easy to understand. You feel like, oh, I have stomach pain. And so I can't eat certain foods and I need to take care of myself and there'll be a flare and then you manage that symptom and it goes away. And you know what that tell is of peptic ulcer disease, stomach pain. But for stress, often things are happening to your body and you're not even aware of what that physical manifestation is. That's not to say that it's, your headaches are caused by stress, but they're certainly worsened by stress. So when you have a certain symptom happening to your body, understanding that, hey, that could be my canary song.
I think everybody intuitively knows what their canary is. I think everybody knows what theirs is. I've got a bunch of different ones. Whenever I'm stressed, and I don't even know when I'm stressed, but I don't know why, but I don't know consciously that I'm stressed, but certain things start to happen. I have this really weird one where on my tongue, I'll get a little bit of not like an ulcer. It kind of feels like I've got a spot on my tongue. I get that whenever I'm stressed. My skin gets worse. So I get like spots on my face when I'm stressed. There's a few of them. I'll get a cold pretty much exclusively when I'm stressed, which happens about once every 6 months or so. I think generally I manage stress well, but I'm not immune. I once upon a time thought I was immune. I thought stress and all these other things and mental health all happened to other people. Turns out it happens to me too.
That's right.
And I think I really pushed myself for a good 5, 6, 7, 10 years. I was the CEO of a company that had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of employees. And I was 25, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27. So I pushed myself very hard. And I think for the first couple of years, I withstood it. But then as time went on, I was not able to outrun the inevitable.